Hey, we got a room full. That's great. So good morning. My name is Keith Leach. I am the co-director of the NorCal Clean Cities, and joined here by my co-director Tim Taylor and our program director Claire Laurentine and our project manager Aaron Heath. And we're going to welcome you to our first of a series of in-person Fleet Academy events that we will be producing in collaboration with our partner professional associations, regulatory agencies, and our sustaining sponsors. NorCal Clean Cities. How many of you guys have heard of Clean Cities? Whoa. Hey, by the way, how many of you are public employees? Okay. And how many of you work for private companies? Okay, this is great. Okay, because we're doing what we need to be doing. We're trying to get the word out. And what we really would appreciate, those of you that have contacts, networks, particularly in the fleet industry, share some of this information if your buddies aren't here today. NorCal Clean Cities, formerly Sacramento Clean Cities, is affiliated with the U.S. Department of Energy's Clean Cities program. It's a government industry partnership designed to reduce petroleum consumption in the transportation sector. There are currently almost 70 coalitions nationwide that work with government agencies and private companies to identify mutual interests and meet the objectives of reducing the use of imported oil, developing regional economic opportunities, and improving air quality. NorCal Clean Cities serves the communities in the greater Sacramento metro area, as well as communities across Northern California. We are currently in the process of expanding our areas of service beyond our current areas of service of Sacramento, Placer, El Dorado, Yolo, Solano, Butte, and Sutter counties, north all the way up to the Oregon border, and of course, to the Nevada border to the east. The Fleet Academy is a program being implemented by a partnership between the Northern California Clean Cities Coalition, the Silicon Valley Clean Cities Coalition, and the U.S. Department of Energy. Over a 3-year period, the Clean Cities Coalitions will conduct a number of educational events such as this, both in person and virtual, with webinars to help fleet managers gain useful information about running a very cost-effective and efficient fleet. In other words, fleet best practices, and sharing their experiences with the challenges and complexities of implementing zero emissions technologies that are being mandated by our regulatory agencies here in the state of California. Just to touch on this, this is our website at the U.S. Department of Energy. There's many resources that are available to you. I just wanted to step through here, and if Aaron could go to the coalition locations, just type in Chico, California, and wherever you're from. And there's our website. And this is where we're all about. They haven't really changed our footprint yet, but we're working on it with them. They did get our name changed, so that's a good thing. The main thing is that we're sharing best practices from those that are right in the thick of it in working on running their fleets as best as they can in a time of scarce resources, particularly if you're in public agencies, and trying to strategize and basically prioritize how you're going to spend your money, how you're going to prepare to meet these regulatory requirements, and probably most importantly, how to avoid fines from the California Air Resources Board. And I'm not going to get into a lot of that detail. I have some subject matter experts here today that will share their experiences, and they've been working on it for a long, long time. But again, the purpose of these get-togethers and our webinars is to share information and to share best practices and to make sure you know that there are resources that are available that we can connect you with. And so welcome. And I'd love to talk to you a little bit later on our break, particularly if you're from the public sector or the private sector, and take a look at all our equipment that we have on display out here. And always would like to recognize our sponsors that are on our program. So with this, I'm going to turn it over to our subject matter expert, Lon Word, who I had the pleasure of working with for several years in Sacramento County before I retired. And Ron is right in the thick of it, and he's one of the fleet managers in Northern California that I would say is well ahead of the game. Right? Okay, Ron, take it over.
All right. I'm gonna probably treat this more like a meeting than a presentation. I'm probably just gonna sit down.
Okay, so
And I like the questions that Keith asked, and I'm glad to see both public and private fleets here. How many of your organizations have sustainability goals or greenhouse gas goals, or are you just here to get information about regulatory compliance and the bare minimum? Can I see a show of hands? How many of your organizations have the actual sustainability goals to meet or improve on? All right. So for those that don't have organizational goals, you know, then regulatory compliance becomes, you know, the must, right? To avoid fines. So, well, I'll give a little bit about my background. I have not been a public servant my whole career. I'm a truck driver at heart. I took my first ride in a Mack truck at 4 years old. And my stepdad had trucking companies in the Bay Area my whole childhood. And I spent summers of my teenage years in the warehouse, loading trucks and spotting trucks and operating forklifts and working on trucks, keeping them going. And then I stayed in trucking and ended up working for a dump truck company in Napa Valley. And I drove transfer dump and end dumps and maintained all of that equipment for more than 10 years. Ended up buying into that company as a half partner. And then we increased that into a landscape supply company. And I ran that as an owner with my partner for 7 years. And then ended up selling out of that, and I bought one Peterbilt, long wheelbase Pete, one flatbed, and one dry van. And I spent about 7 years as an owner operator running mostly West Coast, some out into the 7 Western states with my own authority, doing my own tax returns, all that stuff. Also maintaining my own truck, and in about 06, I got out of that because I had 2 young daughters, and it was, you know, trucking was getting tougher. It's getting tougher every day, right? I'm glad I'm not out there today with these fuel prices, but I spent my weeks on the road, running a lot of Arizona and up in Idaho and like that, and then my weekends maintaining the truck. So it was time to make a change. And I went into fleet management with a company called Scully Truck Rental and Leasing. And I was their service manager from about 2006 to late 2010 when Ryder bought Scully out. So I went to Ryder Transportation for 2 years as their senior service manager in West Sacramento. And being at Ryder was a little bit of an eye-opener, and I started looking for a change and found an opening at County of Sacramento. And I've been with County of Sacramento since 2012. So I'm not sitting up here as a public fleet guy all my life with no knowledge of what it takes to run a business. You know, running a private business is tough. And I can say from experience. And so each of those, the reason I bring that up is one, so you know who I am, but two, each of those fleets is a whole different strategy as far as managing a fleet. Things that you do as a owner operator, like running tires down to 2/32 and getting every little mile out of them. It's a lot different when you're running a fleet. And I'll just share this little story. When I joined Scully Truck Rental and Leasing, I came from small trucking companies to a very big company. And my boss called me one day and he says, "You have 60 trailers that went in the fleet at the same time." He goes, "I want you to go out and start taking tire checks of those 60 trailers." And I said, "Okay." And he goes, "And then I want you to pick 3 trailers a month to pull rubber, scrub them, have them recapped, and start replacing those tires on those trailers." And so I did my first week's tire check and I said, "Jerry, these things are 8, 9, 30 seconds. There's none of them ready to come off." He says, "Okay." And I said, we can't pull these off now." He's like, "Pick the lowest 3, pull them off, send them to the recapper." And I'm like, "Scrub good rubber off birds and casings. This is crazy." But he said, "If you wait till all 60 of those tire trucks, trailers come due for tires at the same time, you will sink. You will sink your budget. You need to start now." And that was my first wake-up call from, okay, I'm not running one truck with 2 trailers anymore. This is different. And when you go from there even to a public fleet, it's different yet again. And so there's a theme in what we're going to talk about, and each fleet is unique. That's me. That's what we're talking about today. So, County of Sacramento, a lot of people don't realize, so, City of Sacramento and the surrounding areas, but a lot of people don't realize that, our county goes clear down basically to Antioch, to the Antioch Bridge. This is kind of our stats, who we serve. And we have a lot of levee roads, and we even maintain some of these old bridges. So it's a little different than if you go to Placer, El Dorado, Amador, some of those counties just that neighbor us. For instance, we don't have a single snowplow in our fleet, but our neighboring counties do. But we deal with a lot of old infrastructure and we're prone to flooding. And so that drives a lot of what our fleet has to do. A little bit about our fleet. We're a little over 2,800 units. 460 of those individual departments own them, but we maintain them, and that's going to be significant in some of our discussions. 7 maintenance facilities, about 100 fleet employees. And then key to this whole thing, everything you're going to see today is I have some ideas that I contributed to behind what you're going to see, but this isn't all me by any means. It's a whole staff. It's a whole team of very talented, experienced people that make all this happen. And some of these reports and dashboards you're going to see, I couldn't produce them if I stayed up all night watching YouTube. We have some very talented IT administrators. I can put the
Ron, I just wanted real quick, I saw some people taking pictures of these.
uh-huh.
We will provide all the slides. There'll be a few days after this happens, but everybody that was registered will get all the slides. I just want to make sure you don't need to take pictures. Sorry, Ron, didn't mean.
No, that's all right. And so the point being is, I have the basics and I have my experience from Scully and from my own trucks and all that, but it takes some very knowledgeable people to collect and process all this data so it's in usable form. But talk to me after, because I used Excel to do a lot of this stuff in more rudimentary forms before it was all like this. And so let's talk about regulatory compliance. And so at the county, we have a climate action plan. We also, our county board of supervisors in 2020 also declared a climate emergency. Then we have the executive order that bans petroleum fuel cars, the sale of new in 2035, right? I think we're all familiar with that in California. We have a phase 2B climate action plan, and then we have advanced clean fleets regulation. And so private fleets here today, the enforcement again of private fleets for ACF, as we're just gonna call it ACF from here on out, isn't being enforced on private fleets, but for public fleets right now, for every vehicle we buy over 8,500 pounds GVW, we have to buy 50% of those as zero emission or electric. And that's a tough nut to crack in a county fleet, and we'll talk about why. The key to all this is that all of these regulations, climate action plan, they have certain goals we have to meet, but they don't always align. And so we're constantly trying to navigate that. Talked about every fleet is unique. This is a few pictures of what our fleet does, but as a fleet manager, I encourage you to, back in the truck rental leasing days, one of my bosses said, unbuckle, don't spend all your time at your desk, get out and walk the yard, visit customers, and really see how they use this equipment, especially in a public fleet, to understand auxiliary loads. Even with telematics, the auxiliary load piece is, if you're gonna track PTO time and all that, it can be done, the technology's there, it just gets quite a lot more expensive than just tracking the base vehicle and how many miles it does and what trips it does during the day. But understand this, because if you don't, and you're speccing trucks and equipment, buying equipment, you could end up with operators telling you, hey, this doesn't do the job. And this is where I value my experience actually running trucks, because I understand how frustrating it is when you run in or operating equipment that won't quite do the job you need it to do. Aaron, how much time do I have? I want to make sure I finish on time. And
40 minutes, let's say.
all right. So you want me to finish by noon?
Yeah, noon will
Okay,
be good.
all right. This is another, this is a truck hit one of our bridges, and this is another example of what these guys got to do. And I mean, I think there's a stereotype of county workers and, they do the bare minimum, but I mean, these guys get out, and you can see from this picture, they do some heavy work, and we got to provide that equipment to do it. This is kind of a representation of our fleet. And what you're seeing is at the top, we do have a few hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. Talk a little bit about hydrogen. We have all of our refuse fleet runs on renewable natural gas. We have some lingering liquid natural gas that is going away. We do have a good portion of electric. But with a county our size, 994 square miles and 70 miles, north to south. And when you're talking about medium and heavy vehicles, electric doesn't always work, and especially like the boom mower you see there. There's no way right now technically to make that zero emission, and so we're running renewable diesel in all of our diesels. And this is about, finding low-hanging fruit and optimizing where you can, because you don't always have the perfect solution, right? And so we'll talk about electrification, because there's a lot of attention around electrification right now, and that seems to be the magic bullet, right? But I like to ask, why are you going to electrify your fleet? If you have a mandate, we're going to electrify the fleet. Okay, why? Well, the easy answer is because, it's zero emission. But I mean, to the granular why. Is it an organization or executive directive? Is it for climate plans, climate action plan initiatives, regulations? Is it simple greenhouse reduction, meaning if you can reduce greenhouse gases in another way, or running another fuel, or just buying hybrids, or just get rid of old vehicles in your fleet and replace them with new, more efficient, would that achieve that goal? And it's about looking at different parts of your fleet and analyzing where you're burning your fuel and where your emissions are. Is it just to reduce fossil fuel consumption? or if you're in a private fleet, is it about marketing to your customers, hey, we're running clean vehicles and hire us because we care about the environment, you know? So understand this, because when you start strategizing how to meet these goals, it's gonna matter. Strategy. Now, there's a lot here. I'm not gonna read through everything, but mainly for us at the County of Sacramento, I mean, we have a climate action plan. We know what those goals are, and we're moving toward those. Some of those goals in our own climate action plan are very aggressive. And if we would have had input from fleet when those goals were being set, we would have probably asked that they be a little more different. And to give an example, one of our goals is to replace 945 vehicles with electric by 2030. Well, that's effectively 3 years away. I mean, and we don't buy 300 and something vehicles a year. So it's, you know, and even if you were to go back 5 years, we don't buy that many vehicles. So we're not going to replace that many vehicles, but we put the emphasis on regulatory compliance and then meet those climate action goals the best we can. But with ACF, it caused us to look at our vehicle replacements differently, because medium and heavy duty are tough to electrify, tough to make zero emissions. So we had to really look heavily at offsets, and we'll look at how we did that. So in the light fleet, that means we had to electrify some things that we might not have looked at if it weren't for ACF. But it makes more sense from a charging infrastructure standpoint and from just availability of vehicle and ability to build the vehicle to do the job standpoint. Sorry, I hate public speaking, so I take it wrong. Or watch as I hate public speaking. All right, that's not anything. My wife's always calm down. So, you know, 50%, what's that mean? Well, it means if you're gonna buy a petroleum fuel vehicle, you need to buy an electric vehicle. And so we started tracking those purchases. This is advanced from where this shows. This is probably a year old or something, but we started tracking every electric we bought over 8,500, and we looked at it as, okay, now that allows us to buy this other one over here that we know we can't electrify. You see animal control trucks up there. A lot of various trucks reach just descriptions, and it's going to be hard to read, but basically we bought a lot of e-transits because the upfit on those is simple, and you know, it's the same upfit as a regular petroleum van. And so we bought those for our facilities maintenance, where we looked at the telematics and where they operate, and the range is perfectly fine for them. And so we were able to buy some e-transits, and also you see some Silverado EVs and some Lightnings. Those were all Lightnings before Ford said we're not going to build those anymore, and we'll talk about that uncertainty in the market too. But we paired those two vehicles we could buy, and then when we ran out of those, because we can't just buy everything we want to buy in the light fleet, that's when the discussions had to start. And we use this kind of morph from, we still use it for tracking, but this morphed into a conversation piece with those departments, because we'd have to talk to them about, hey, we looked at your trip data, we looked at your truck specs, and we believe this can be electric. And they're no. And we show them, look, we've already contributed in other parts of the fleet. We've already replaced 6 of your trucks that we didn't even have to talk to you about. But now we have to have a discussion because we're out of these trucks that we can buy in other places in the fleet. So that serves, you know, various purposes. This Lightning truck that we built, and this is just going into service actually this week. You see that truck on the top left? That's a highly customized truck. It's used for sign repairs all over the county. And they carry post hole diggers and shovels and cement, and they go out and they fix all the signs. And so there's about 15 of those trucks and 9 came up for replacement. You know, and we have CARB ACF. So we told that department, hey, we've purchased other vehicles in the fleet, but we need to talk to you about your 9 replacements. And so what we did is we, you know, told them if we can buy 3 Lightnings, then we can buy the rest of your 6, the group of 9, as your custom built vehicles. And you still have 6 more that aren't due for replacement yet. So in your operations, even though that Ford Lightning won't do everything that that other truck will do, for 3 out of 15 trucks, do you have place in your operations that these can be the vehicles that do sign inventories? They drive around, make sure signs are still standing. This can be quick repairs. This can be quick responses, you know, after accidents and stuff like that. Can you do that? And they said, yeah. And so this is what we built. And we don't pretend that that Lightning can do that same job, but this is how we step into, there's no chassis, or I will say, you know, we could probably build that sign truck on Horizon, but it would be a platform that's completely foreign to them and a cab over. And a lot of drivers don't like cab overs. And so this was the compromise, but I believe it's going to work well. And it is workable for the customer. A typical F-350 single wheel. This customer at first didn't want this E-Transit cutaway, but we told them, look, we can't replace all these F-350s, CARB ACF. We just don't have the offsets. And so we built them this. They ended up with actually more cabinet space and a lot longer cargo area. And their trip data, which we'll look at some examples of trip data, absolutely supported the use of an electric. And so this is what we built. And we followed up with this driver that drives this, and he actually likes it. He said, hey, it's a little longer, and it is overall. But he says, no, it's nice, and it does the job. So once he's in it and operating it, he really doesn't have many complaints. In this discussion, I think it's very important not to forget about the basics. And further on in this presentation, there's a slide about where the fleet manager sits in the whole circle of communication, right? And unfortunately, it's like right dead in the middle. You don't want to be the electrician. You don't want to be the guy that's planning and charging for a facility that's clear across town that you don't have anything to do with. But unfortunately, you're going to be part of that discussion when you start putting alternative fuel vehicles in the fleet. Even if it's a CNG, you know, the question is going to be, where do I fuel this thing? Well, you're not the fuel expert, but you're going to become one because they're looking to you for answers. So, but my thing is credibility. It's like, don't forget about the basics of your fleet management: safety, paying currency, paying quality. Your forecasting for replacements, we'll talk about that, but don't forget about the safety, paying currency, and just the everyday management of your fleet. Because do that well for your customers and for your executive group, city council, board of supervisors, so that when you need to make recommendations, they trust that you're telling them the right thing. Keith called me a subject matter expert earlier. I've got a lot of experience in this stuff. I don't know that I consider myself an expert, but people are going to look to you to be the expert, whether you want that or not. Benchmarking, get your fleet dialed in, know where you're at so that you can show improvement, because someone's going to ask you, why are we doing this? What results has it produced? Is it saving us money? Whatever those goals are, be able to show them. Collaboration with facilities management, especially around EV, you're going to need to know who those electricians are and who you need to talk to get charging installed. Real estate, Why real estate? Well, in the county, we have a lot of leased facilities where we have vehicles, and so we're gonna need them to either renegotiate or do the initial negotiations with those landlords to allow for EV charging where they park. And I obviously understand your organization's environmental and sustainability goals. GPS telematics, so I would say the biggest evidence and data that you're gonna need are GPS and telematics. That's where your most compelling, kind of indisputable data is gonna be. And it's where you're gonna be able to see your opportunities. As well as some efficiency gains for like smog checks. You know, other than what we call problem children, we don't send vehicles out for smog checks anymore. They're all done via telematics. So that savings right there, not spending labor or even having to pick up the phone and talk to a smog shop can pay for your telematics over your organization. Obviously, every fleet's different. Your unit count and fleet type, how many vehicles you have to smog, but I urge you to, if you don't have telematics, start that because you're gonna need it, and even if it's only to find efficiencies in your fleet so that you have money to budget for other diagnostic faults, you know, prevent breakdowns before they occur is another thing huge. A few things that we learned at the county, you know, you think, well, let's, you know, we found Geotab was on the state contract, so it's like that satisfies our competitive bid requirements. And we said that, yeah, this sounds good. Here's the problem though is, you know, we have multiple bargaining units in the county, so we had to have and first, we found that our transportation policy really didn't cover use of telematics. We had to decide, because, you know, when you're dealing with bargaining units, the first thing they're afraid of is, you know, you're gonna track me, you're gonna discipline me, you're gonna try to fire me, right? And that, for our fleet, we're like, no, we don't manage the drivers. We supply the vehicles to the departments. They manage their own drivers. All we want to know is if it's got a low coolant or a low oil pressure or, you know, a misfire diagnostic or understand the trips and where this vehicle travels, where it's being used. Now, when we get reports of vehicles running 84 miles an hour, can we ignore that? No, I mean, but it's not up to fleet to discipline that. In some cases, we'll reach out to the department and say, hey, you got this vehicle that's consistently going way over the speed limit, or the driver's not wearing a seatbelt. And that's as far as we get involved. And honestly, as a fleet, managing a fleet, we don't want to be any more involved in that. We've got our own problems to solve. So consult purchasing, make sure you're gonna be able to purchase it, obviously. Verify that it's compatible with IT systems. We're on AssetWorks for our fleet management information system, FMIS. So our telematics supplier, that data can be exported and interact with our FMIS, excuse me. And then, you know, if you're having to make justification for it, set benchmarks as far as, you know, I don't know, seatbelts, accident rate, whatever. But in some cases, you're gonna need data. And what's tough is setting that benchmark data up front when you've never had telematics before. But you know, in your fleet, if you know your fleet, you'll be able to look at those indicators and identify them. So I talked about how big the county of Sacramento is. We also have 80 parking locations all over the county. Those don't show all of them, but that presents some complexity when you're trying to electrify or put a whole fleet zero emission. And so, and almost none of those locations does fleet have any say or authority or responsibility for, oh, we're gonna come in and start trenching and laying a wire and put chargers in, you know? And so that's where these discussions happen, and that's where the data matters. We just finished, you know, it's important to communicate with your power utility. We're in a SMUD area. Many of you are probably in a PG area. Understand what they can do for you for charging infrastructures if they have grants and incentives. And then, you know, vet those grants and incentives. We'll talk a little bit about that. But we just finished a pretty large EV charging project with SMUD where and through NorCal Clean Cities, they can point you toward grants and incentives. But we were able to do this with SMUD participation. They actually hired the contractors and paid for a good portion of it. Our air management district in Sacramento also paid for a good portion of it. And so these charging infrastructure projects cost us about quarter to a third of what they would have cost us if we paid for the whole thing. And there's some management around that. It's time consuming, keeping all of the entities aligned. But you know, we got it done. So, and that allows us then to increase more EVs in the fleet. So, you know, I say, you know, start communication with your utility early. Have them assess, if you have some sites available, have them assess what your electrical capacity is, or if it's not there, what's the timeline and cost for getting it there. Because we have so many parking locations in the county, we actually went for RFP and hired a third-party consultant and actually we actually hired two because one consultant really had a good portfolio around retrofitting old buildings, where the other one had a good portfolio around modeling energy consumption for new projects. So we felt that both of those kind of fell into, you know, because we have a lot of old infrastructure in Sacramento. Project approval, you're probably not going to get approval for, okay, you've got $4 million to go put chargers over here. Let us know when it's done. It's probably going to come in steps. And so you're going to need to understand those approval process and navigate either your city council meeting or your executive board meeting, whatever that may be. But you're probably going to get first approval for a feasibility study, and then move to architectural plans and cost estimating, and then look at grants, partnering with you, you know, put together your partners. It's probably not going to come in one fell swoop. So get ready to navigate this. And in a public agency, it can take time. It took us a long time to get that last project done. In fact, Keith wasn't retired when we started.
Everything takes a long time in Sacramento.
Yeah. It does take a long time as a public entity. So understand that. So the key to that is look for your low-hanging fruit now and identify those locations now and at least start the things you can. Utilities usually will look at your energy capacity probably for nothing, you know, just to come out and look. And you can get information about grants, incentives. And then final site planning, and you see the whole thing. Here's something that, you know, happens. You get into the stuff, we're gonna put charging in, you don't realize till it's in, right? But think about who the charging is for. Are you gonna offer employee charging? And if you are, are they gonna pay for charging, or are you gonna make it complimentary? Is it gonna be publicly accessible? Some grants require that it be publicly accessible. Some grants are purely for fleets. There was a grant that we would have liked to take advantage of a couple years ago that we looked at, and it started with you've got to identify 100 ports that are going to be to support vehicles already in your fleet. Well, we couldn't identify 100 ports, so we were done. It was kind of not even worth going any further than that, looking to see if we could qualify for that grant. And so sometimes you need to look at the high level requirements and determine if it's worth going forward. But what my caution is here is, and we have this in County of Sacramento, we've offered employee and public charging for free on the ChargePoint network. But we're reaching the point where we're getting enough vehicles in the fleet where we're gonna have to take that back. We're gonna have to make those fleet only. And when you have employees that their expectation was this is gonna be free charging forever. It's not, and they'll go out and many of them will say, I bought this car because of free charging. And it's like, well, I'm sorry you did that, but this isn't forever, right? Now, maybe you can do forever, but I'm thinking, I'm just advising, think about the future, think about the expectations. And I would say, if you're gonna make charging employee accessible, set those and plan on leaving those, because you're gonna get unhappy employees over it if you don't. And so just understand where your charging is going and what to do. EV charging policy, you know, you don't think when you're putting chargers in that you need some long policy saying how they're gonna be used, who's gonna do it, who's gonna maintain it. This is the thing, you know, it's like our facilities says, well, no, this is for fleet. We're not, well, wait, we don't do work at all these, and we don't have electricians. And so this is stuff we're still working out even to this day. Because you can't have charge, you know, people think it's just electrical appliances, you're gonna sit there and work. And that's great until someone rips a cord out of the charger, who's gonna fix it, right? Or the sun bakes the board and you need a new board in it, who's gonna fix that? All right. Let's get it, we have 15 more minutes. Okay. On those 9 trucks that I talked about, I want to tie this in so it would be relatable. The 9 trucks where we did the 3 lightnings. These are the 9 trucks, and we pulled a year's worth of telematics data. And you see that 110-mile threshold. This report, and it's basically, this is a simple export from X to Excel from the GPS data. And it's like, we came up with this. It's like, show me how many days each of these vehicles drove over 110 miles in a day. How many work days in a year? And what was the max daily distance? What was the average daily distance? And then obviously you see how much percentage is under 110 miles. And so I put a couple marks there on the number 4. So 4 times greater than 110 miles, right? And then you have the other one, 19 times over 110 miles. And why did we choose 110 miles? Well, if you look at a Horizon truck, which many of you may not be familiar with, basically 110 miles is the mileage that whether you get an E-Transit van, a Horizon, a Lightning, a Silverado, even if you figure battery degradation over the life cycle and, you know, a hot day running AC, just about all these vehicles can make 110 miles. And so that's why we set it there. Some can make many more than that. And you could customize this to whatever vehicles, but basically this data tells us that a good portion of these trucks, if not all of them, could be candidates for electric, especially if you're only replacing 3 with electric, right?
Just a minute.
Yeah.
She's gonna be here.
Okay. It's all moved. So the 19 times, so you know, obviously that's the vehicle that you go, well, if we're gonna do 3 of these, let's just forget about that one. But the other thing about this data is when you sit down with the operator and you say, hey, how many miles do you think you ride average? Like, oh man, 120, 130, it's terrible, you know. But when you show them the actual data, it's less than that, right? And when you get into passenger cars, these are work trucks. When you get into passenger cars, most county trips are 30 to 40 miles a day. So if you have something like a Chevy Bolt with a mileage of 270 miles, I mean, that car can absolutely do county service, and do county service and not even have to charge, but every 4 work days. And you might find that it only works every 3 days, right? Or moves. So, electric passenger vehicles absolutely fit in a public fleet in nearly all cases, but when you take that number 4 that we looked at, and we look at that exact unit, and we drill down, we see that those 4 days, you see that red checked out box there. Really, other than those 4 days, the vehicle's actually max is going 100 miles a day, you know, and you can look at that highest mileage, and I've kind of redacted all the location data on the far right, but you know, a lot of times I'll just say when you look at those highest mileage days, in most cases you can absolutely see opportunities that that vehicle probably didn't need to drive all those miles. And so, or maybe it went to a vendor that day because it had a specialized thing and had to go to Fresno to get something fixed, right? So just some things to think about. We also look at our annual vehicle miles traveled by vehicle class, and this is really important because when we do charging projections and all that, we can do this at the department level. I can look at a certain department and go, of their pickups and automobiles, what is their average vehicle miles traveled per year? And then I can deduct from that their average miles per day and convert that to kilowatt hours. And so we'll see some examples of that. But it's important though, when you do these things to, you know, take trailers, things that don't run on their own power, right? Just look at the powered vehicles. This is just a blow up of that same slide. I'm jumping around here, but there's a reason for that. Annual fuel consumption. It's important to understand your fleet's annual fuel consumption because ultimately that's what you're looking to convert to, not just electric, but whatever fuel you're going to move to, right? And this is where, you know, the fuel burn is really what obviously generates greenhouse gases and pollution. And so if your goals are just around pollution and not so much electrification, I can say that for one example, if you look at our fleet and you look at just changing the fleet, you know, you just look at the average MPG of a hybrid in our fleet versus a gasoline vehicle in our fleet, the difference is just under 15 MPG up to 44 MPG. And so I like to say the cleanest gallon of fuel is the fuel you never burn, right? And so even if you can't afford electric, you can't put in charging infrastructure. If you just update your fleet to hybrids, that could achieve your greenhouse gas reduction goal right there. And so it's about looking at your fleet and where your opportunities are. But you see the blue numbers up there. We don't have a good way to measure electricity yet. The pieces are there, but we aren't capturing it. So basically what I do is I look at the miles traveled and then I use a multiplier to figure out, estimate the kilowatt hours used. But you see unleaded. In our fuel burn scenario, unleaded is really the biggest offender of the fuel that we can't make renewable. And so if you can lessen that, we're going to go down. Remember that number of 1,256,000 gallons of gasoline in a year. This is the bottom of the sheet. It wouldn't fit on all, but we look at what percentage of our fuel burn is alternative versus non, you know, just regular conventional fuels. We do one calculation, including hybrids, and one calculation that wipes out hybrids from the scenario. But you see, we're, forgive me, I think 63%, and then just under 60% alternative fuels of our total fuel burn. But the thing that's notable about this is really the only, we use some petroleum diesel where we can't get renewable we have to buy renewable on full truckloads. So there's certain locations we can't put a full truckload, so we end up buying petroleum diesel, but unleaded really is our biggest offender, and so if you can reduce your unleaded fuel burn, this helps this scenario a lot, and that's the main purpose of that. And sometimes it's just about replacing your vehicle on time, right? Getting that new vehicle that has a lot better MPG rating, even if it's not a hybrid, you're gonna gain efficiencies by just having a new vehicle. And that's where you need to be able to sell it to the city council or whoever you're talking to about the budget to replace it, because to them, that's a big chunk of money that they see going out the organization, but they don't see the day-to-day maintenance and repairs that go into that vehicle unless you can communicate it. That's where the data really helps. I gotta give credit to David Worthington from Santa Clara County. He put this together. I think David Renshaw is all well from City of Fairfield, but this really is true. You're gonna be the center of attention whether you wanna be or not. In order to show this data and communicate it to everybody, you're gonna be right there in the middle. So get used to the attention. We'll talk about forecasting. And we're running low on time, but I want to be respectful of your time, but we'll run through this quickly. Our average fleet age right now at the County of Sacramento is 5.1 years, and we worked over years to get it to that point. But I see this as very important, and I'll say this is, and even for you private fleets, that aren't having ACF enforced right now. You know, if a new administration comes in, that could all be back on. So look at your average fleet age, look at what opportunities you have now to replace vehicles. Because when ACF came into effect, we had a respectable fleet age. We didn't have an old dilapidated fleet we had to urgently go out and replace. And that gave us a lot of leeway and a lot of ability to strategize and buy pickups instead of have to figure out how we're either going to keep old trucks on the road and keep them running or how we're going to electrify. So that's why I want to talk about this. So this is a replacement model we built. It started as a big ugly spreadsheet, and this is where Gabe Vasquez at our county, he's our IT systems administrator. He can take my crazy ideas on a huge ugly Excel spreadsheet and make it look palatable. But we built this forecast tool that looks at the purchase year, the cost, it adds an inflation factor. In our case, it's 8%. There's 7.93 there because there's some corruptive data in there. But it also shows what we have budgeted and what is due in the outlying years. And so this is a tool that you can look at, and it doesn't mean that just because vehicles say they're due replacement on this report, we go out and replace them. But this is a starting point to see where you're at. You can also see our vehicle classes, and we can compute the average fleet, average age of each of those classes. And so when you see those heavy budget years, and you want to avoid those because you don't want to go to your executive group or city council and say, you know, we've been skating along pretty good here, but we got this big obligation coming in 2033. You want to see that comment, and you want to see where you can either defer vehicles in lighter years or replace units sooner, say in 2030, where you see that heavier budget year, to even that out. And so this is just a valuable tool. There's a ton of data behind it. We can sort this for over 8,500. We can sort it by vehicle type, by class type, by department. You can see how many different ways we can sort and drill down. And so if a department wants to know, hey, when are my vehicles being replaced? This is invaluable. It gives you the numbers. You can sort that PDF to look at it. Here's something I want to drive home. If you have departments that have their own vehicles that you are not advertising, you're not appreciating, and you are not planning for replacement, but you maintain them, it's time to start having a conversation, and maybe you already have, but you know, they're gonna be in the same boat as you, and chances are you're reporting those vehicles for emissions and all that, just like you are for the rest of your fleet. So you see the average fleet age of department owned in our fleet is almost twice what the average fleet age of our rentals are. And, you know, you staff for vehicles that are properly maintained within their life cycle, but you likely have some of these in your fleet that are coming in your shop way more often than they need to, or they're not being used and you're sending out a tow truck to jump them every 3 months, right? So you can get into the shop just to PM them. Those discussions need to happen. I'm gonna linger on that too long. With all this, the fuel burn, the forecasting, everything, we can look by department and do charging projections. And I have a huge disclaimer on the write-up here that I'm not an electrical engineer, and through charge management and all kinds of, you know, software, you can do this a lot better. But this is just how many miles do these types of vehicles drive? What does that mean for kilowatt hours per average day? How many days do you work up at the top? All those peach colored cells are customizable. You can change them. You can change how many work days. And then if you go, well, wait, this is average. What about, you know, May through September when we're really busy? Okay, well, you 40% busier or 20% busier? We can send this to a department and they can plug in, oh, I want a peak factor of 35%, and they can adjust that. On the right, those aren't driven by any formulas or anything, those are just recommendations. And so we'll do these for key departments and tell them, these are when your vehicles are gonna be replaced. This is when you can expect to get electric vehicles and how many kilowatt hours per average day. And then you can figure out what your peak needs to be. This helps them to understand they're gonna have to put charging in. The highlights over to the right are like, if you're gonna, put in 4 level 2s and a DC fast charger, and if you're gonna start trenching and laying wire, maybe just figure for 10 and 2, like you're gonna have to have in 2027. This is a much more complicated example that covers class 1 through 8 and also takes into account that right now we're doing 50% of the vehicles ordered 8,500, but in 2030 we got to replace 100%. And so this is kind of where we start the discussion with our customers. I'm over time. So I'm going to rip through these. Basically, we took and determined that light vehicles, you can get into an EV about 30% over the cost of a petroleum vehicle. And so this is the same forecasting. When we get into heavy vehicles, these are the vehicles that are available. I mean, there's more than this, but they come in pretty much one wheelbase. We order our vocational trucks by the inch and the wheelbase, and we build a truck. Okay, and we figure about 80%. Now, if you look at those trucks in the previous slide, all those trucks cost about 3 times more, or 150% of what the petroleum vehicle or tractor costs, right? This 80% comes from, so we can set this and plot out about what we think electrification is going to cost. And all these have a disclaimer on them. Basically, those aren't dollar amounts or budgets or anything. This is just showing what the tool can do. This shows that when we build a vocational truck like this, actually the chassis cost is about 40%. When you're talking diesel, is about 40% of the total cost of the truck. The body and upfit is about 60%. And so we can break that down and say, well, if the chassis is 3 times more in 2028, in 10 years when this gets replaced, but the body is equivalent, which it's not going to be because you're going to have power on that body. When we build trucks like this in the future, it's going to be an electric chassis. with a powered body with a battery pack that plugs in and powers the body. Basically, that body could operate independent of the truck, which isn't the case now. This truck you're seeing has a underdeck van air system. It has a hydraulic system to run the crane and a winch and everything else. So, but this is how we, in a simple example, come up with 80% more. If you're talking just a Freightliner Cascadia, an E-Cascadia, it's gonna be 3 times as much. This gets into some weight considerations that I can talk to you about later if you're interested. This talks about the amount of power a heavy fleet takes in a day, equivalent of about 7 Empire State Buildings. That's for a fleet of 450 4 trucks. This is kind of a, you know, look at use of grants and incentives. Doesn't meet your use case. Is it for fleet versus public? Are there regulatory restrictions? What kind of reporting and data collecting do you have to do long term? Do you have the resources to collect that data? Does the benefit outweigh the cost of complying with the grant requirements? Can you meet the timelines? A lot of these require shovel-ready projects that you can start them right away. Sorry, I'm trying to talk too fast. Yeah, and if, you know, one thing too, we found in the county, it's like, if you know you gotta charge and start planning for it, start budgeting for it as if there are no grants and incentives, because your best chance of qualifying for a grant is if you have a project ready to go that's planned, you know how much it's gonna cost, and then that way, when you apply for that grant, it's a much easier process than trying to plan a project and sell it in the same format, right? This is courtesy of David Worthington too. It just is an illustration of, you know, you got planes in the air, but the runway's not even built yet, right? How do you time all this stuff? And that goes back to that fleet manager in the center graphic. You may not want to be the air traffic controller, but you're going to find times when maybe you are. This is all the stuff we talked about. Third-party consulting. You know, consider that if you find that doing all this and collecting all this data is eating up time that takes away from your efficient management of the fleet. You know when to raise your hand and tell your superiors that, hey, I'm not an expert in this stuff. I can collect the data and you know, be the voice here, but you know, you can't do everything. So sometimes third-party consulting or other experts are needed where your expertise, you know, goes outside your expertise. That's my contact information. I'll be here after if you want to talk to me or correct me on anything. I'm not right on everything. Guarantee you. Thank you very much.
Hey, I just want to give a quick round of applause for Keith and Tim and Clean Cities. So between Santa and I've known Keith for about 17 years now. Time flies by, but we are definitely have partnered and done a lot of great projects together over the years. And I'm gonna give you a twist on an old cliche excuse. The dog didn't eat my homework, but my 9-month-old puppy did get me up at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and 5 o'clock. So if I look like I spent 3 days in Vegas, you know why. Anyway, here we are. How we can make EV transition simple, and I'm giving you a little bit of information about Verdeck. It's a 17-year-old company. Just to give you a quick intro on myself, I was the director of public sector for SolarPoint for about 6 years. And then about 2 years ago, Verdeck asked me to join their team to help with the public sector projects across the country, all 50 cities. And here's a little bit of what we do in terms of a turnkey solution for different projects from design all the way to implementation and monitoring. Oh, and that's the charge point headquarters, if you don't know where all the different hardware is on display outside of the parking lot. So, a little bit more about Verdict, kind of our footprint. What's really nice about our company is that we're a one-stop shop. If you're looking for design, if you're looking for hardware, software solutions, we can provide that with the flexibility of coming in at any different stage. I think Ron, really did a good job at illustrating how fleet managers are kind of like the man in the middle when you're asked to lead and educate from that position. And that could be a very isolating position at times. And if you bring people in and partner with the right partners, you can definitely, create something a little better and educate your team on. So each one of these sections, 1 through 8, can be its own, presentation or podcast, whatever you prefer. But these are basically how to do it, in terms of laying infrastructure for your different projects, starting with site surveys and the design, and ending at performance and monitoring. There's different approval processes, different strategies along the way, and we can get into it, in the Q&A. If you have any specific questions, I'm happy to answer any of those. But basically 1 through 8 is going to be your journey through putting chargers in the ground. And then a little bit more about what Verdict does in terms of fast response and training. We pride ourselves on creating tickets to help you maintenance. You'll always have a body, you'll always have a person to talk to. We're just a phone call away. One of the frustrations I think in the industry with charging infrastructure has been lead times as well as uptimes. And we think that with the right hardware and software solutions, plus communication, we can help. And once again, hardware, installation, monitoring, and maintenance, those are basically the pillars. Once your chargers are your project's approved and you're ready to go. One of the nice things about Verdict is that we have flexibility. We are one of ChargePoint's oldest and top partners, but we do have the flexibility to provide other manufacturers as well. And here are some of the product line that some of you may be familiar with. The Express Plus for DC fast charging. We also have the 280 for ChargePoint and the 250. We are an awarded vendor from the state, so we have state pricing, state contracting. And we also have a Sourcewell contract that will give you access to all the different product lines. Level 2, which you might be familiar with, CP 6000 and the CT 4000, and the CPF 50, specifically designed for performance. And then this was just, if you were at the ACT Expo in Las Vegas, there was a conference and ChargePoint just released this. It'll be available for purchase probably towards the end of this year. But this is the Express Solo. And what's really cool about this, it's a DC fast charger that can go up to 600 kilowatts and beyond. And it only has a 1.1 square meter footprint. So maybe the size of a travel bag. And you can generate that much power, which is really cool. It also has anti-theft cables. You can charge directly, and in the future, there's another version coming out soon, but you can do DC to DC. So that's really, really nice. Some more of the product line from ChargePoint, and again, Verdict. There's a preference towards different manufacturers like Tesla or ABB. We do have competitive pricing and provide that hardware solution play regarding those manufacturers. But as most of you know, regardless of which hardware you land on, it's the monitoring and maintenance and the software where all the magic happens. And at ChargePoint, we do have access to provide all the different software features. My opinion on this is that ChargePoint on ChargePoint is the best. You get all the cool features on a ChargePoint hardware with the ChargePoint solutions, but you can't put the ChargePoint software on any hardware solution. 24/7 online monitoring. You can run all the reports you need. If you need any third-party justification, return on investments, but even, how many trees you saved. And that's something that anyone's interested in, you can do that through your own certification. And then here are some of the clients that Verdict over the years have been able to service, both on the federal side, private side, and of course the public sector. And some of the major projects we're currently working on: New York City Public Transit, public charging with some of the pantographs, which is really full staff at the MTA, the IRS as well, and some port authorities that we're involved with. And another thing that's really cool and we're on the forefront of is the off-grid. A lot of the military have training facilities that are not in the most, or well, kind of in a rural area. And we do provide solutions for solar, the battery or generated applications. So not just the military, but any farming or any off-grid solutions needed. And it can also be for temporary construction too. Like if there's a construction site that is planning to be there for 6 to 9 months, we can set up something like that. So we have about 100 installations. We could definitely customize any order or project tailored to your needs. I did mention earlier that we do have a lot of competitive pricing through cooperative purchasing vehicles, one being Sourcewell, which helps you facilitate procurement process with your agency. And that's about it. That's a quick little intro on Verdict and the ChargePoint platform.
And Tony, you'll be around afterwards for
Yeah.
a while?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm gonna turn it over to you, Melissa. Okay. Thanks. So those of you that are in the private sector, probably used to be leasing vehicles, public sector, my experience is, they have a hard time with that, but this is a very interesting company that Norcal County Cities has been involved with. And they actually are making a footprint in Sacramento. I'm just going to tell you all about how it works and how they take care of everything. That's right.
Do. Thanks so much, Chief. Hi, everybody. I'm Brenda Campbell. I'm one of the co-founders of Mitra EV. I have had the great fortune of having a ton of support from clean cities over the past 3 years. When I first started in this industry, I came from transportation and I knew nothing about energy. And I mean nothing. Like I knew when I flipped the light switch, the lights came on. I knew Tesla made EVs and that was about it. And Tim and Keith and Team really took me under their wing to help me not only understand the business, but the ecosystem and all of the challenges that you guys face. I remember sitting at a fleet academy 2 years ago and I was like, oh my gosh, there are so many hurdles to face. And I had no idea what it was going to look like in the future. And today is super different. I get to do all these fun things like Keith said, soup to nuts. So share a little bit more about our program, who we are, and do you want me to take a clicker?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So I know you raised your hands earlier, but I was sitting in the corner. So how many are private fleet? Okay. Public fleet? How many of you guys have implemented EVs into your business today? How many of you would do it knowing what you know today, the same way? Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
There we go.
I mean, okay, all right, good, okay, cool. And so these large companies, so if you look at who deployed EVs first, what are the first companies that you saw deploy EVs? By the way, I'm not just gonna talk to you guys are totally gonna have to interact, so. So who was the first big companies you saw deploy EVs?
Amazon.
Amazon, UPS, correct. All of those companies have one thing in common. They care more about the bottom line than anything else. They're highly efficient organizations who hire throngs of people to figure out how to save a little bit of money. And so when they first started deploying EVs, I'm sure nobody has Amazon packages delivered every day, right? It's just me. So when the Amazon started showing up with funny looking trucks, everybody was like, oh, they have funny looking trucks. Those funny looking trucks save them a ton of money. I know that we should all care about the environment. We should all care about the fact that EVs are cleaner, and that's wonderful, and probably we do. But for big businesses, it's all about dollars and cents. So for most small companies and mid-sized companies, they don't have a team of people who's out there looking on how they can save money. They're trying to keep the lights on. For most public fleets, my guess is, how many public fleet people here have an hour extra time in their day they just get to hang out and watch Instagram videos? Anybody? No. So what happens is everybody's overtaxed, and now we've decided through either mandates, operational changes, that you guys get to have a whole nother list of job duties to your day. And it's complicated. So when we look at these big companies and in any business, fuel is a huge part of your expense. How many people in this room manage a fuel budget? It's totally consistent, right? Like your fuel budget doesn't change? Okay, just making sure. So for most businesses, going to electric is some type of a strategy. We talked about this earlier, whether it's a strategy because you have an ACF mandate and somebody is telling you you're going to change and you're going to like it, or you have an internal push that says, we have to make enough money somehow. The cost of business is going up, all expenses are going up, gas prices are going up, we need to do something. And so oftentimes what happens is we spend so much time working in our business, we don't have a lot of time to work on our business until all of a sudden things get tight or a mandate shows up and you have to do something. We did a study with Clean Cities in Sacramento, well, we're called Clean Cities. Am I ever gonna not call it Clean Cities?
Well, I still like it.
Okay. In Colorado, Atlanta, Georgia, and also Ohio. And we asked a whole bunch of small business owners and medium-sized business owners how they felt about EVs and what were they doing. And it's really interesting to me because we polled, what was it, 293 people, but not me, people who were highly skilled in this whole situation. And they found that at least 58% of them are operating at least one EV in the state of California. So they've done it somehow, whether it's a salesperson who's driving a Tesla or whether they've moved to a medium duty SUV or whatever. 70% drive less than 150 miles a day. So earlier in the presentation, we talked about how there's a perception that there's not enough range in the EVs. But when we actually look at the range or the average daily range of the vehicles that we want to transition, it actually totally makes sense with the vehicles that are available today. I'm not an EV for all person, don't throw tomatoes. I come from transportation, so I'm an EV where it fits person. I'm all about the use case. When you talk about those big giant vehicles that they're trying to transition, where they're gonna have to have auxiliary onboard power, it's not available today the way we want it to. It doesn't do the work. But there are lots of places where those vehicles will work today. In the small business or small business arena, 73% of those people that we polled own their own property. Power is very valuable. People don't realize the asset they're sitting on with the power that goes to their property. And 75% park on their site overnight, meaning that they are an ideal operational use case for electrification. The 4 big barriers, okay, this is where it gets fun. Who has unlimited resources at their job? Like, cost is never an issue. That's how much it costs. Anybody? No. And we've already established that nobody has any extra time, right? Okay. So, range anxiety. How many of you guys have driven an EV and it's run out of power? You've been slept on the side of the road. Me too. It's fun, isn't it?
I did it on purpose.
Oh, you did it on purpose?
Yeah.
I wasn't on purpose. I was on the grapevine screaming at people like a lunatic. How many of you guys have pulled up to a charging station and it didn't work? How many of you guys have pulled up to a charging station and the cord did not fit to your vehicle? These are all real life things. I could tell you 400 stories about me driving Bob. So Bob is my GM right drop that you got to meet out there. That's my truck. I love Bob. I probably put more miles on the GM right drop than anybody except the FedEx driver. I've been stranded on the side of the road. I've had all kinds of issues because the infrastructure isn't built today for what we want it to do in all use cases. But in most situations, it does work. So we have to figure out and learn what works and what doesn't. And operational disruption. So the number one thing I hear from people that we do business with is, I don't have time for this. I have to make payroll. I have fire. Something happened at work and my phone is blowing up. I have 47 people on my to-do list. The last thing I want to do is move to EVs. So a couple weeks ago, Tim and I were talking about this event, and I had only recently been to Chico 2 weeks prior to meet with a potential customer. And I spent 170 nights a year in Sacramento. I know Sacramento like the back of my hand. You ever need me, I'm usually at the Rancho Cordova Marriott. You can find me, Bob will be in the parking lot most days. But we came up to Chico to meet with a potential customer who was a referral from not one but two other customers. And we came up and we met with them, and they were a staple in Chico. I've had a heating and air business for longer than I've been in this business world. And we got to learn a lot about their business. And Tim goes, hey, we have this event in Chico. And I was like, let me try to pull this one off. So I called Bob, who's in the back. Not named after my truck, his name was Bob before he and I said, hey, I would love to give you my truck for 2 weeks, and I want you to just run the crap out of it. I'm gonna bring it to you, we put it in an L2 charger, and I want you to run it and see what happens to your fuel savings. Now, I already know, because I don't ask questions that I don't already know the answer to, so I know he's gonna see fuel savings. So I drop off my truck. I didn't want to put you on the spot, but I'm gonna put you on the spot. So Bob is a business owner of not one, but two, and maybe a few more businesses. So this is not his first day. He runs a fleet of how many trucks?
I'm Bob with Royal Air, by the way. Not Bob the truck. Her truck's named Bob also. I have a business and I run a Royal Air Conditioning and Solar here in Chico. And I'm currently operating 45 vehicles through that business. I have another business in renting that is a little under 20 vehicles. So, yeah,
Did you
So-
say Reading?
yes.
We're doing our next event in Reading.
I already knew that was coming up.
I'm sorry.
So wait, before you sit down, so when we showed up with the electric vehicles the first time, you were like, hey, these are nice, right? You showed up with Bob, he's like, this is pretty cool. But what happened when you actually ran the truck? What are some of the things that you noticed or found out?
I realized that I'm saving a lot because just right on the truck, right on the dashboard, I found my favorite screen was it was telling me how many miles per kilowatt I'm getting. And all of a sudden my head's going, okay, how much am I paying per kilowatt to charge this? And I start doing the math in my head and I'm realizing how much I'm saving. And Bob's not a small vehicle. Even if I'm driving one of our smaller vehicles at work versus the big vehicle there, I'm saving a ton of money. And that's even without me switching to EV charging rate through PG&E. That's paying my full blown kilowatt that I'm paying now. And if I register a charger and register a vehicle through my company, it switches. I talked with PG&E today. It switches me to a much better rate. And Marissa and her team could get these vehicles charging at specific times when the electricity is the cheapest and have it all programmed for me so that it's saving me way more money than I'm even already saving driving that thing around. So.
And he drove the truck to Sacramento, he drove it to Reading, like he physically drove the truck everywhere and had rave reviews, which is awesome. But he's busy running a business, right? And so if you were to ask Bob and say, hey, Bob, do you want to dedicate one of the people on your team's time to worry about charging the right charger infrastructure? Is it going to work for your right vehicles? The answer is probably no, even though he's saving money. And that's where we come in. And so if you have, are any of you guys from Sacramento or been to Sacramento? Okay, do you guys know who Sierra Pacific is, the giant red trucks on the road? So that was one of our flagship customers. We put charging infrastructure for the site in Rancho Cordova. And when we first went to Jason's a tough customer. Let's just be clear, he doesn't mince words. He's ex-military and he's all about the bottom line. And he said, I'll take a couple trucks. And now, literally 2 days ago, he's like, I need 11 more. How soon can I get them? And so we've got 20 something trucks on the road with him today. And he sees huge fuel savings consistently every single day. One of the things that I don't think we kind of talked about gas prices being fluctuating a lot. But it's really hard for you guys to budget. I know for the big fleets, you guys are buying fuel by the truckload, you have contracts that's a little different. But if you're a private company or a smaller fleet, those fluctuations make a huge difference where electricity tends to be much more stable. So I love our trucks. It's my favorite thing about my job. I have to do a whole lot of things I don't like during the course of the day. However, one of the things I love the most is getting to see like these trucks actually in use. So you can see for most use cases of a medium duty truck, Bob can handle it. So we've got ladder racks, we've got lift gates. These are actual trucks on the road with Sierra Pacific and how their folks use their trucks today. And so not all of them were one-to-one conversions. So not all of them were a van and became a van. Some of them were much heavier duty vehicles. They realized they didn't actually need those. There was other options for them. And we do everything from passenger vehicles to trucks, the box trucks, all those things. So the different thing about me is that I have an unlimited amount of money. Or nobody thinks it's fun. I mean, you know how hard I work to fundraise, you would totally laugh. So what I do is I have a turnkey leasing program or rental program. So if you're a public entity and you can't lease because I'm not on Sourcewell, because they're not friendly, they don't like the fact that I give you the infrastructure, no cost to you. You can do a long-term rental with us, just like you would with Enterprise. You can do a 5-year rental, and I'm gonna put in the vehicle with the wrap and the outfit, it shows up delivered, and at the right time, your infrastructure will be done too, no cost to you. So it's a little bit of a different program. It mitigates all the risks. So if you're a fleet manager, there's a lot of things you have to do. I can take some of those off your plate. If you're a private company, you don't have to hire anybody to manage permits and construction and the outfit and all of that stuff. I literally do everything. Not me, I have an entire team of people. I just can take on the truck all day long. We also have, I should have put the map up. We have charging infrastructure in Sacramento. So 2 sites in Rancho Cordova, downtown at Downtown Ford, commercial and retail, and then up near the airport. 11 other sites under construction for fast chargers, true fast chargers. So if you're in a situation where you need to deploy vehicles, but you don't have the charging infrastructure, you can call me and you can use our chargers at a reasonable cost, and then you can get your truck sooner than you need it. Any questions? Did anybody go outside and see my truck on your way in? Did you like it?
Looks good.
Looks good? Okay. Who is running medium duty trucks today? What kind of truck, what kind of vehicles are you using?
Horizons,
Okay,
and
how are the Ryzens working for you?
we only have one so far, but it's kind of a use case.
Okay.
It's fine. I mean,
Okay.
your conventional cab over design that's still doesn't go far enough necessarily, but what we use it for, it's been fine.
Okay,
And we've had it for a couple of years now.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Where are you from?
Sacramento.
Okay.
California. And then we're just starting to deploy some, their pole engineers are gonna be tow trucks.
Okay.
So we have about 8 of those that we're building. First one is most done. It's pretty good. That one has a lot farther range.
Yeah.
Than the Ryzens do. Larger battery pack. The GBW is a big heavier.
Yeah,
It's good.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you put in your own infrastructure?
Yeah.
Was that fun?
Beat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great time.
Good time? Okay, great. Does anybody have power constraints on their property? Yeah, power constraints are big problems. And so one of the things that we've learned in this fun process is how to stagger vehicles and how to get creative with power constraints. We made really good friends with SMUD along the way, which has been really helpful. So yeah, you'll hear time and time again that this is hard, and it is. And that anybody who tells you it was easy, you should have a lot of questions. Starting with their integrity. Nothing about this is easy. It goes to plan. But there are huge rewards if it's done properly. And for the people who are on the other side, and I'm totally gonna steal the slide with the thing in the middle on the arrows, because you do have this huge lift you have to do. You have a lot of questions you have to answer, many of which you're not gonna have answers to when you start. And so I think the most benefit I found from this group and from Tim and Keith is that everybody's so willing to information share. No one's gatekeeping. No one's like, hey, I ran over this curb. I'm not going to tell you where the curb is. Good luck. You can hit the curb too. They're not like, that's not the plan. So if you're not plugged into this group and you're not, phoning a friend, picking up like, hey, how did it go with the ride? Like, or what happened when you moved to this truck? Or I don't have enough power. Do you have enough power? Can I come charge at your lot? Like, there are those things that we need to do as we continue to move this one. Yes.
I had a question.
Yeah.
You talked about very significant savings on operating costs.
Yes.
You didn't mention a thing about capital cost, which would translate to rental or lease cost. Can you kind of comment about that?
Sure. So as part of our program, obviously fuel savings is a big deal, but because we wrap everything into one payment, you basically have a lease payment or rental, depending upon how your contract is structured, and you're not paying the capital cost to put the charging infrastructure in for the L2s. Also, if you own a property and you need a fast charger and you're willing to share that fast charger, I will pay you about $100,000 a year based upon utilization to put a charger on your property that I'm paying. So all you have to do is say, Marissa, I can have those 4 parking spots over there. I'm going to use it some, which is great, but you can open it up to other people as well. So it's not just about savings, but it can be a monetization for your business as well.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when you were talking about, this isn't a bait question, I actually have this question. You were talking about some of the vehicles kind of downsizing, people realizing that they didn't need as large of a vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of a process that you go through with the company when you start? And what kind of data do you use to identify that?
We do. So one of the things we do is that, so you've noticed some of the other presentations, they talk about bringing on a consultant to do something's TCO and data analysis. We do it as part of our sales cycle. So you send over whatever fleet data you have, and when I tell you it comes over in crazy ways, it could be on the back of a napkin or out of somebody's QuickBooks. We analyze that data and we say, number one, what is a good match based upon your range, which we're actually driving, not what you think the car needs to drive. And what is a good EV swap, and what does the outfit actually look like? When we were the first ones to develop these fold down ladder racks, because when we went Jason at Sierra Pacific and Ed and Aztec Solar, we're like, we have to use long ladders. And we're like, well, you can't leave the door open. And he's like, and we went to the upfitter and they're like, because of the type of walls, you cannot put a ladder. And so I went to Phoenix Systems down in Southern California, and I sat there with their engineering team and I was like, let's talk. And I literally sat with the engineers and we talked about, we could reinforce here and put a bolt there to be able to put a ladder rack on top. We were the first ones to develop those. So as we have those conversations, like, what does your business need? We have lots of examples of what we've done. Like when we first put the Tommy Gate on there, the Tommy Gate company was like, I mean, we built one, but we don't think it's going to work well. And it's worked great. And so we have those discussions about what does your truck actually do? How do you use it? What is the range? And we take you through that process.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I just had a comment on the power
Mhm.
constraints. We sell electric yard trucks, and so a big place where there's constraints are on ports, where they have hundreds of trucks, limited power. And my comment is, we have a charger that has onboard batteries, so you can slowly charge the charger and then fast charge on the back end.
Mhm.
So we found that very positive feedback for those sites that have limited power.
Yeah, for sure. I would love to chat with you after. We've put at Aztec Solar and Sierra Pacific, or Aztec Solar and Chico, we have a battery system we put on. But I mean, that was like a $250,000 battery that we put on there. It doesn't get used because of the way SMUD works. Long story. But yeah. Awesome. Any other questions? Okay. Amy's also in the back. She gets to do all the sales for Sacramento. So introduce yourself, and we would love to chat with you guys.
Thank you.
Okay, now I have the pleasure of introducing my co-director, Mr. Tim Taylor, who has been with the NorCal, previously Sacramento Clean Cities Coalition since 1994, when Clean Cities actually started. And, Tim's got an impressive resume. He's worked for the Sacramento Air District, and he's still going at it with me doing this.
I did have a couple things I wanted to say. Somebody earlier mentioned how where Sacramento County runs all the way down to Antioch and here. We and I think Marissa said something like, by the way, when was the last time you had a presenter bring a ringer in to be their own advertising? I think it was a great move on Marissa's part to have somebody come in as a testimonial, but I think it's phenomenal. And I'll talk a little bit more about Micro in a minute. But Marissa said, she's constantly saying Sacramento Clean Cities. And I said it for so many years that it comes out pretty much automatically. It's pretty hard to get used to NorCal Clean Cities. But because there's so much territory between Sacramento and Oregon, and there was no Clean Cities Coalition providing any kind of service, and that's a theme that I'll hit on as I go through this. Our goal is to provide service, to provide help, to match people up, fleets, and communities to match them up with services that would be useful to them. And so we're encouraged by the folks that we work with to take a look at. And so we've agreed to adopt the territory all the way up to the Oregon border. So previously we were the Sacramento Clean Cities and we were in the green. And we have now become the NorCal Clean Cities and Communities Coalition. And whatever that purple, red kind of color is, that is what the footprint that we are now taking over. So the green and the purple, that's what it is, in the territory. So we go over to the Pacific Ocean and Mendocino County, and then all the way up to Oregon. Oh, I also wanted to be sure to say, I don't want to forget this when I go on sure. You all have this agenda. The back of the agenda has all the folks that have displays outside and the speakers. So in case I forget when I get done, I just want to make sure it's clear. Every one of the folks that you might want to talk to, the vendors that have displays and the people that have people, all their contact information on the backside of this. And as I said at some point earlier, we will send all of the presentations and post the video of this. Do we have video? We do? Yeah, okay. Well, I knew we had audio. Apparently we have video too. So we'll get all of us in profile on the video. We'll post that. It'll be a few days because we like to edit out the ums and the ahs and the sort of the transition points. But we'll get that edited out, post that up along with all on video. So, I guess I'll now try to get through this thing as quickly as possible. The Clean Cities Coalitions, there are about 75 of them around the United States. They're under the umbrella of the U.S. Department of Energy. We're not employees of the Department of Energy. We simply have an agreement with the Department of Energy to provide these kinds of services to fleets and to communities. Many of the coalitions are parts of government agencies. They're parts of like the city and county of San Francisco. Their environmental management department is where their Clean Cities Coalition is housed. And in other places, it's in state and transportation agencies. We aren't in part of Caltrans, but there are some other states where Clean Cities Coalitions would be actually part of the state transportation. As I said, our goal is to try to provide services to fleet operators and to communities. We have basically three major legs that we stand on. One is what we call Fleet Academy, which is what this is about, providing services to fleets. Another is to provide services to school bus transportation managers. We actually had a school bus consortium meeting yesterday. And interestingly enough, even though they're operating vehicles that are 40,000 pounds gross vehicle weight, and they have white fleets, which are pretty much the same thing that most fleets have, and in many cases, they have construction equipment, and in some cases, they even maintain their landscaping equipment. They don't think they're fleet managers. They think they're school transportation managers. So they have a completely separate group of people that we work with that are school transportation managers. They also have to deal with students on and off buses and people with routes and parents that are saying, where's my kid, and all that kind of stuff. So they think of themselves as being different. So we have school bus consortium, we have Fleet Academy, and we also have a group we call SAC EMO, which is a community group to talk about mobility in communities. Our goals are to try to figure out how to provide these kinds of services, put you together with those kinds of services. So, reducing operating costs. Ron did a great job this morning. He could have done about a 2-hour deal. He did a 1.5-hour webinar for us a couple of months ago, and he still couldn't get through all of it. So talking about how to reduce fleet operating costs and make your fleet as efficient as possible is something that we constantly are trying to talk about. Funding, access to funds, training and educational resources, workforce development. Claire who has recently joined us, part of her background was in workforce development training. So we strive to provide those kinds of services to fleet. And, this is pretty much, the way you go about it. You listen to what people want, and we clearly want to listen to what you want. If you say, hey, we want some information about, renewable diesel, we'd be more than happy to provide information about renewable diesel, renewable natural gas, renewable propane. Believe it or not, there is renewable gasoline. You can't actually get it because there's no market for it, because in California, there's a mandate to do EVs. But if the mandate was to reduce greenhouse gas emissions at the lowest possible cost for the greatest number of people, there would be lots of renewable gasoline out there. There's a couple different companies that actually have certified gasoline, what they call carbon intensity pathways, but they won't market it. I tried really hard to get them to market it. I actually got public agency fleets who said, yes, of course, if you just get renewable gasoline, we'll buy nothing but renewable gasoline. And of course, most fleets in California only buy renewable diesel now because it's so common. And so it makes so much sense. But with the EV mandate, nobody's going to try to market renewable gas. They blend it into normal regular gasoline just to reduce the overall carbon intensity of the regular gas. They also blend in a lot of ethanol. Anyway, listen to fleets, try to figure out how to match you up with the service you need, match you up with funding opportunities, and figure out how you can implement strategies to save costs. And the same basic strategies with community groups. This isn't one of the community groups that we would be working with in this setting, but there are a lot of community groups, nonprofit organizations that have small fleets and that also work a lot with community people. And so we work a lot with communities to try to help them reduce their vehicle costs, to help them implement electric vehicles, to do mobility hubs, that sort of thing, transportation strategy. This is an example. Actually, that is a workshop that we did, and that was with Micro EV, actually. That's their CEO. Is that his official title?
I think he's co-founder, but yeah.
There you go, co-founder. And that you might even almost recognize that chart that's on the board there, because it looks a lot like what Marissa was sharing with us a little bit earlier. The cost savings associated with that. But this is the type of workshop that we like to try to sponsor. And can't tell right outside there. I think that's a Aztec Solar van right outside that window. And there I am, standing there with a suit and tie and acting like I'm all important, and standing in front of Bob. There you go.
On a red carpet.
Yeah.
Yeah, on a red carpet, exactly. So sometimes you get called upon to stand in front of people and say things, and so there I was standing in front of the camera saying things. But fundamentally, this is the Micro EV, and the thing that I think is fascinating about this, you got a picture of it with Marissa, but this is a business strategy that works pretty effectively even without grants, although it's great to have grants, but it works because you're not talking about class 7 and 8 vehicles that are 2, 3, 4 times as expensive when you get an EV version of it from a conventional version. There is a capital cost that's a little higher for the electric versions than the conventionals, but it's not multiples the way it is with the heavier vehicle. So you're talking about a vehicle that's not that much more expensive and has an incredibly reduced operating cost. So what you have is, and you're also looking at applications that have relatively reduced ranges and long dwell times at the place where we visit. So Aztec Solar goes to a house with all solar. They spend the day in front of that house. That's one example, and Sierra Pacific. the air conditioning. They're gonna go someplace, they're gonna spend a long time at that place. So you're not talking about driving 300 miles a day. You're talking about driving less than 150 miles a day, fits in the range of this vehicle, and it works perfect. So micro EV is a business case that works even without grants, which is not that common for electric vehicles. And this happens to be a dashboard that I pulled off of a presentation that we delivered last, I guess it was in the middle of May. A woman who is talking about fleet information services, management services at the city and county of San Francisco, who was talking about fuel economy and saving money with fuel economy and idling time and monitoring those kinds of things. So it was just an example of a dashboard with a bunch of pretty pictures on it. So I just wanted to put it up there to look at that as one of the strategies that we work at. We're trying to talk about all the different ways you can reduce your fleet operating costs and at the same time help fleets understand if you're not a public agency fleet, this doesn't affect you now. But don't forget, the Air Resources Board Advanced Clean Fleets Regulation did bring all fleets in, not just public agencies. All fleets were covered. And then when the federal administration took over, there was basically the threat of a lawsuit, and the public agencies, the private companies were pulled back out of that. So they're not enforcing it against private companies today. Public agencies must comply with the Advanced Clean Fleets Regulation. 2028, who knows what's going to happen? Private fleets may be brought right back in. The language is all there. All you need to do is turn the switch and you're back in there. So it's something to pay attention to. This happens to be Keith Leach, and this happens to be our school bus consortium group. At an event we had, I think, 22, 23 different vehicles on display outside. We had, 75 or 80 people in this particular event. And it was just another example of us doing this kind of event, writ just a little bit larger. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to provide a resource to you as fleet operators. If there's something you need, let us know. We'll do our damnedest to try to figure out how to make it possible or bring information to you about this contact information. Those are the contact information for those of us in the organization. And as I said before, all of this information will be posted up to our website, and everybody and not just everybody who attended, everybody who was invited, will be sent information about how to get this information off of our website. And there will also be a video posted as well. So the audio will be there too if you want that. So once again, I wanted to make sure that I pointed out that we have this information that describes who we are and what we're doing. They clearly together. And then we have this information about the vendors and the speakers, so public contact. And I think we're at the end of what we're gonna do. Do you want to?
The only thing I was gonna do is maybe just open it up for questions real quick before we let people go out and check out the exhibits.
And could I do one other thing first? If you're a vendor that's here, whether you have something on display or not, would you stand up and just introduce yourself? If you have something on display, well, but if you stand up and yourself and give us 1 minute about what you're up to. Maybe we can start with
Mark Ellison with Intermotive out of Auburn. And we do a lot of products, but we do anti-idle solutions for ICE engines and something that's a retrofit. So.
excellent. What talking?
Mukhtar Nazari, I'm with Ethereal Trucks Plus Energy out of Stockton. Everything we sell is EV, and we sell class 4 to 6 medium duty trucks.
Anybody else that wants to? Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andre Robinson, Regional Sales Manager for Harlingen Motors out of California. We manufacture class 4 through 6 battery electric vehicles.
And there's a Harbinger vehicle outside the step van.
That's correct.
Right outside.
Tanner Swanson with Orange EV, part of our West Coast sales team. All we make are electric terminal tractors, yard dogs, spotters, whatever you want to call them. One thing we're up to, we just announced today, we got an order for one single order for 600 trucks. Which was pretty massive in our industry.
Well, I saw Tanner's name on our registration list. I immediately got in touch with him and said, would you bring one of those yard goats over here? Just put it on display. I thought, man, that'd be great. A big old yard goat out there. But unfortunately, the one that's up here is over at Sierra Nevada Brewery. Do we have anybody from Sierra Nevada Brewery? Some people registered, yeah. You probably, do you operate the Orange?
I don't operate it, but I manage it.
That would have been, maybe I can ask you afterwards if there's any way we can get a hold of that thing at some point, put it on display. I know it's probably pretty busy because you guys are working that truck pretty hard.
Yeah, we could probably, if we had some more time to make some accommodations.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic. Yeah,
Well, I was asked a question once, and I realized that the people in this room probably provide a better accurate resources than me, but as far as the state contract, renewable diesel, Keith, you're more familiar with the state contract or outlying counties has the ability to buy out that contract. What's the availability of renewable diesel or outlying counties?
sorry about that.
I think, you go on the state contract, any public agency. And of course, we all know that, you know, basically the renewable diesel is at parity with petroleum diesel costs in California. So, you know, I think, you know, the opportunity's there. You don't have to do anything to your trucks. They actually burn cleaner. You diesel trucks, and I'm a big proponent of that. It's been doing it a long time in Sacramento County and the city of Sacramento.
It's been a long time since I looked at the details of how the process, but the difference between renewable and bio is basically the feedstocks and how it's refined. And really, like R99 renewable is refined on its own. It's not a blend. It's a certain amount of bio added to petroleum. So I don't know what information we could steer them to research renewable diesel, its properties, the house refined, how it's different than bio.
Well, again, I think for those of you that are not that familiar with clean cities, probably the best thing you can do is go to northcalcleancities.org. Make sure you're on our listserv. We do a weekly newsletter, and we have a whole archive of webinars and topics, and if you can't get the information you're looking for there, you can go to the US DOE Clean Cities website, and there's a whole slew of information, much more technical information that's available. And that's a whole nother area that the national labs that are funded by the US taxpayers, we actually are able to tap into those resources for some of our stakeholders that have, you know, major projects that they're trying to figure out what to do next. And so I think we're all sharing information. We're all looking for answers and the best way to run our fleets, and that's why we're here. So I thank you all for joining us. We'd like to keep folks around just for a minute if you have any questions before we go out and look at the equipment. But if you have any questions for our presenters or for Tim or Claire or I, let me know if there's anything right now.
Can I just remind everybody, I'll bring in a couple big bags. Please break your boxes. Oh, by the way, there's some lunches out there that are left over. And if you don't take them, we'll give them to the coyotes. And just break your box down and put them in a bag.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us today.